And it's me, it's another one of the Paulvins welcoming you to Starfleet Universe On Call. And tonight, well, it just looks like it is moi. And of course, the chat room, both of them. Though I think it's probably just going to be mostly in the chat room over here, which, for those of you who can't see it from my side, is the chat room for Twitch. I've got my lighting a little bit different this week. Obviously, if you don't like it, you think it looks weird or something like that, please tell me. Because I did some kind of funky stuff. I got some yellow filters going on to tone down the brightness of the lights. I might have to do something like I did before, which I actually did kind of indirect lighting kind of thing. Instead of using the yellow to tone it down. So not sure if I look that weird. Obviously my color is a little paler than normal. And of course, those people on the podcast are going, I can't tell you're paler because you don't see me. But for those on the video, and I apologize for not sending out a notification on Twitter, so that people could be, because so currently it's only me and I think Dave at the moment in the stream. And of course, also I'm starting a little bit early too. I'm starting actually on time. Usually I start like 5 to 10 minutes, between 5 and 10 minutes late, usually like 5 or 6. But anyhow, tonight, since I went over SFB Online last week, I decided, why not? Let's do it. And that is, I'm going to be going through the history of Starfleet Warlord this week. And because the only other thing I can imagine having a history of is, of course, this podcast, but I think that'd be kind of boring. Not much to it, to be blunt. In my mind, when it comes to the podcast, because the podcast has changed a little bit over the years, but overall it's remained the same. My lofty aspirations have yet to be fulfilled, and I think the only way to fulfill them is going to be a lot of hard work. And the thing is, the question is whether people actually are interested. Because as I mentioned before, that the reason why I actually created this podcast was to, the whole idea, because especially with using TalkShoe and all, was to basically just have, like we did back at Origins at the bar. We'd hang out, we'd talk about SFB, we'd talk about the games we played, we'd talk about, strategies and tactics and all that kind of thing. Or whatever's new coming up, some new SFB modules that Steve Cole is announced and going to be releasing. Things like that. That is what I was hoping this could be, but obviously it's hard for people to do. So it's turned into an actual a lot of times a podcast of you listening to me talk about the topic of the day. Obviously, in some cases, I include people like Gary and Barry, and geez, who was it? There was someone else. Jeez, I think it might have just been Barry. Because when there was one other person, crap, I forgot his name. I haven't talked to him for a while, so I know he has a little girl who has special needs and so forth. So I think it was Sean. He used to come by a lot, and to the point where I thought he might be a co-host and so forth, and we could work things out so we could plan on things and all that kind of thing. But that, of course, that didn't happen. So anyhow, to get and move on to, Yeah, Gary Carney. Well, Gary Carney, he stops in every once in a while. Oops, I did not mean to do that. I'm sorry. Ah, don't mind me. Right now, I'm playing around with this. For those of you who can't see it, I basically, one of the things I got for a Christmas gift was a hand warmer. And my hands get cold. And so right now I turned on the hand warmer. I turned it up a little bit too high, so it was just a little too warm. I just wanted enough warm to warm up my hands. But anyway, to get moving on to the history of the Starfleet Warlord, of course, we have to go back in the annals of time itself. And that is somewhere between 1989 and 1990 is where we have to go all the way back to then. In the mind's eye of Bruce Grawl. Of course, that's where this all starts, because Bruce Grawl is the one who originally created Starfleet Warlord. But do you realize? I'm sure some of you realize that Starfleet Warlord originally wasn't the game he first created, and actually, even that game wasn't the game he first created. So back in 1989, 1990, it's a little fuzzy. I'm assuming it was around 89, possibly even 88. Not quite sure, because I was just reading the history which Bruce Grawl gave in the newsletter, and he was just mentioning how what he did was Bruce Grawl originally created a game called Crossroads to Empire. Now, this is going to be the ultimate SFB campaign game. But, big surprise, just like any other SFB game, it had a campaign game. It had the normal problems. Players, they built these ships and they didn't want to lose them. Big surprise. But this is campaigns. You lose ships. Number two, the battles. When you try to resolve combat using SFB, battles were too big, not to mention logistics, to really fight them out. Because, can you imagine? If you have fleets larger than like 5 ships, this gets nuts when it comes to playing an SFB game. That can take, weeks to play it out. Because of real life issues, unless you can actually set aside working for a month and have all the players set aside they're working for a month, you're not going to have it play out very quickly. Of course, then there's, he mentions, there's of course the issues of getting the logistics, that is actually getting players together at a certain times, and playing out these games. And of course, then, because the issue with normal battle resolution, turns took months to get through. And then Bruce would have to bug the players to submit the turns. In this case, of course, at that point, it fell apart. So out of that first campaign game, Crossroads to Empire, Bruce Grawl then decided, okay, that's it. We're not going to do this again. Because he still had the, yeah. Yeah, Chris was mentioning when it comes to huge scenarios, there have been some that are like 20 ships in SFB, and if anyone has actually played them, my guess is, like most large games in SFB, the one thing that you end up doing is you play through a few turns possibly, and then you decide who won, because it gets tiresome. It takes well, let me see. What's the longest playing session I've ever done was around 10 hours. I've played one SFB that took us 10 hours. And this wasn't as huge as some. But, I think I don't remember. I don't remember that. I just remember that we started, I was in college. So we started playing at night. We played all through the night. We were in the middle of the night. We juiced up on caffeine and Twinkies, not Twinkies, but some other sugary delight, to help us get through it. So, so the big scenario, large number of ships takes a huge amount of time. Actually, was that the game where they were attacking the the Andromedan starbase? I forget what it was called. Dang, that's awful. I know the Andromedans. I just forget the name of what they called their starbase, which was interesting. Oh, actually, Iggy, you said that you played with Andromeda and the Dominator failed its DizDev roll and ended up in front of a Fed Klingon fleet. My only question, Desecrator, thank you, Dave. The one thing about that situation, when was it? Meaning time-wise, what rules did you use? Because if you use the captain's rules, you're fine. Commander's rules, yeah. That could be interesting. Oh, okay. Yeah, because things blew up for a lot more in commander's level. So okay, so yeah, we all agree that large combat in SFB just takes too long. So what Bruce Grawl decided was, okay, this is nuts. I still want to create a campaign game. But two things he resolved with that next campaign. One, it was going to be easy to manage. Two, have a means of taking care of all the battles that need to occur automatically. So basically, all combat was automated. So all you had to do was get your ships, put them into, you have a single hex where they both entered, then you have a combat. Because Lord knows, even F&E, because if you look at the F&E combat, still takes a little bit of time. It doesn't take nearly as much time as the SFB, but you could use the F&E for resolution, that way of resolving. Obviously, it could actually resolve quickly, but Bruce Grawl said, okay, I'm going all out. I'm going completely automated. Now, the funny part about this is that the whole issue that Bruce Grawl ran into, Aaron Staley, he had a campaign called the Void War campaign. It was strategic in nature, and he had problems with the same thing. People play on SFB online, but the problem with that was battle resolution. And so he'd give people, I think, 3 weeks for resolving battles. And the problem is some of these battles were too large. Even the small ones were taking too long. Because of, even with 3 ships, that could take quite a bit of time to actually resolve. So, he actually Aaron Staley actually added some automated processes. He actually ended up at the very end, before basically the Void War campaign died. He created an automated system for resolving combat. It's a little more complex than what Bruce Grawl came up with. But basically, he realized the same issues that Bruce Grawl ran into. and it does say, and it repeats. So it's just, I bring that up just for the plain simple reason that I just want to point out that it's a normal process of large SFB related campaigns, because that's what Aaron Staley wanted to do. He wanted to have it so that it played SFB, and that was the case. Well, that went out the window. For the small ones, you could still if you want to, you could do actually play it out. But if in case of Aaron Staley, he allowed people enough time to play it out. If they didn't play it out in time, then he would do the automated system, which he created. Now, so Bruce Gall came up, said, okay, this is the idea for the next campaign game, and he decided to call it something which some people might be familiar with. Not everyone's familiar with it. I have mentioned this in the past, which is that Starfleet Warlord came from a game called Galactic Conquest, and actually Bruce Gall originally created it. Now, he originally came up with the idea. The game was really simple. This back in this day, before Starfleet Warlord, there was no such thing as warp gates. Everything was bought at the home office. The only items were the fighters and the PFs. There was no legendary officers, no outstanding crew, no variants like carriers, PF tenders, scouts, or X ships. No tugs and Orions. The tugs and Orions had no way of changing capabilities at all. Basically, couldn't make scans of any kind. There were no monsters or NPCs. It was meant for. Wasn't meant for. An automated campaign that people can join. This was just get a group of people together and automate the playing of a relatively quick campaign. So to say the very least, it was very, very, very boiled down compared to the current Starfleet Warlord. So anyone that knows Starfleet Warlord, you have warp gates. So instead of purchasing things, have to require it at home office, and then take those ships. Imagine this. And that is all you have to buy everything at your home office. So to get from your home office to a distant sector, you have to buy your ship, then you have to haul butt to get from your home office all the way to that remote sector. Versus currently with warp gates, one of the things that the warp gates allows you to do is that the warp gates go really slow. They start at, I think it's 2 hexes for the 6 times you can possibly move. You can move twice. It might take you a long time to get to this distant hex, but at the very least, you got a jump start. You got a head start. So it takes you, let's say it takes you 6 turns. Let me think. Say you mill the map. It will take you somewhere between 4 to 6 turns. Depends upon the obstacles in your way. To get to the next sector over. Now, but that point, okay, so it takes you that long, but you're always running games and so forth. So that means that your ship can then be in the next sector over when you buy it on like turn 5, and so that you don't have to wait for 2 turns just to have the ship get there, get to the next sector, possibly 3 turns to get to the next sector, depending upon the speed of the ship. So, which is 3 turns that you don't have that force available to you, which is the whole idea of the warp gate, is to basically to place ships other than the home office. So, that was interesting. Now, the thing is, as Bruce Scroll mentions, halfway through the first game of Galactic Conquest, people are already asking about the second because of, I'm assuming that I'm assuming the issue was basically some people weren't doing so well, but they were excited about playing the next game, and that's fantastic. So obviously it was something that was going to be very popular. So near the end of 1990, as game number 1, the first game ever played at Galactic Conquest, came to a close. Bruce Scroll did a major upgrade program, added the Andromedans and satellite ships, loans, a whole list of things. And this was known as the expert game, but it was only open to veterans only. Basically, people have already played the game at least once. And it opened later in 1990. And that's when Bruce Scroll thought, like, hey, wait a minute. People are interested in playing this. Now, okay, one thing to remember about back in these days, in 1989, 1990, and that is email was a very strange thing. People weren't using email. So these people, my assumption here is that he started small. He wanted to play a campaign, which was for his local group. That's what he was playing it with. And so, he could run the orders on his computer. He typed them in and then run the orders on his computer, and then have it so the automated system could all run, and then he print out the results and give them and actually hand them to the people. So, there was no internet back then, The internet didn't. Sorry, the World Wide Web did not exist. The internet existed, but the World Wide Web did not. World Wide Web didn't really exist until like 1990, and even then, it was at the very beginning of this craziness called what we now call the internet. The internet existed before. There was no web browser. Those were the days back then. And I'm just reading this real quick. Yeah. Yeah. So by the game number 7, he did a whole number of major modification, which is interesting because he's saying game number 7, and then he's talking about Origins in 1992, which is only 2 years after he actually created Galactic Conquest. But the thing is, he started seeing the market possibilities back in 1990. And then he's saying here, because I perceived that trying to release it as an SFB game was undesirable, and I kind of agree with that. This was the major blow on my part. After I showed off a game at Origins 1992 and started games 10, 11, numbers 8 and 9 had started early in 1992. They saw through the thin disguise. At this point, things could have gone very badly, but fortunately, ADB was not interested in terminating the game. Instead, they asked me to put SFB back in and run Galactic Conquest as an officially licensed game with a name changed. Right. So this, in 1992, that's when Starfleet Warlord was officially born. And of course, he was mentioning here. Oh, the result of this was a lot of the money and time spent in DS up being the game, something which I hadn't been necessary. However, it was a greater good because it enabled me to upgrade the game one final time and create what you see today. Now, so somewhere in this, I'm not sure where I'm assuming the split came in 1992 because it doesn't say that, he didn't mention anything about Galactic Conquest. Because Galactic Conquest is still played today. And it's completely free, voluntary basis of the people who run it, and any of the updates are done by the person who took over from Bruce Grohl. Even though the funny part is, where is it? Give me a sec. And oh darn it, I had it up. So that is, if you actually get the Galactic Conquest rules, the front of it is beautiful. It's really, really cool. I could probably, if I ever get back to actually working on getting a printed copy, because at the moment there's no reason to have a printed copy of the rules. At the moment, when it comes to Starfleet Warlord rules, I've only printed out 2 or 3 copies. And people, they basically pay for me printing the copy and sending it out, so that they have a hard copy. And they're willing to pay that, and that's fine, because the game. Okay, I'm just looking at this for a moment, which is right. I'm thinking about. Okay. Okay, John D. Berg, designer of Galactic Conquest, wants to thank Steve Cole and Steve Petrick for keeping SFB alive the many years I've involved in Galactic Conquest and SFB. Without the support and guidance, GC would not be involved into the rulebook you see here. Now, basically, Galactic Conquest is the original Starfleet Warlord. And John D. Berg is a current designer. He's not the original designer. That would be Bruce Grohl. So this is kind of, I'm surprised that he doesn't mention Bruce Grohl in any of this. The current version is from 2014. That's the last time that Galactic Conquest was updated. The rules for it were updated. So, so to say the very least, it's very interesting. Wow. Okay. Moving on. So that's the beginning of when Starfleet in 1992. That's when Starfleet Warlord officially existed, and I assume at that point that Galactic Conquest and Starfleet Warlord parted their separate ways. Possibly earlier than that. It might be as early as 1991. And that's when, John DeBerg said, want to continue Galactic Conquest. Because I did some quick reading of Galactic Conquest. And Galactic Conquest basically is Starfleet Warlord. If you look at it, because they have the orders that you send in. Give me a sec. Oops, wrong one. I was trying to scroll up on the newsletter, which is only 4 pages long. And you send in. Okay, you have strict format. You say okay. You have a move sequence from here, and which is what happens. And you can buy things, and then you have attack modes and Yeah, attack modes. All this is in Starfleet Warlord. Not all of this, but a lot of this. Okay, they have legendary officers and things like that. So, in my mind, my guess is that as of 1992, that's when they did their split. Because of, as mentioned in what I previously read, that Bruce Grawl had created this whole idea before, with this, and called it Galactic Conquest. And at that point, there was a split, the free, which John Berg would continue to run, but he would never ever charge. My guess is that Bruce Grawl. I have not checked with Bruce. That might be a good idea to do, which is, my guess would be that John Berg said, there's a lot of people that still like to play Galactic Conquest and not have to pay for your service for Starfleet Warlord, and I like to keep Galactic Conquest, which is simpler form than Starfleet Warlord, because Galactic Conquest doesn't have some of the features of Starfleet Warlord, and that's fine. And I think some people like that, and Lord knows, especially if you have a game master, because my guess is he runs these orders by hand, versus Starfleet Warlord, which allows you to enter them into the computer. The computer then creates an electronic turn, and then you can load it into the computer. I can load it on my computer, use the Starfleet Warlord engine itself, and run the games. Have it so it's completely automated. And I'm assuming that's basically John Berg. My assumption is that he does it manually. It's possible he might have automated the system, but it requires a certain format to work. Because one thing, I read Galactic Conquest, and he did mention that, a strict format is followed when writing orders for SQs. The game master cannot be held accountable for unreadable orders. A simple order, which, each game GM may have a preferred format, and they show an example. So, which leads me to believe that each game has a game master, in case they follow a process. I'm assuming that everything is Galactic Conquest is the rules are completely written out about how things work. Because in Starfleet Warlord, if you ever looked at the Starfleet Warlord rules, they give you percentages of, this happens, this happens, this happens. And there's certain things that are left ambiguous because of, it's not actually, the rules aren't explicitly written down for everything that happens in Starfleet Warlord. And Lord knows, I know this because what I have to do many times, which is for Starfleet Warlord, when you have problems, is I have to go and look at the engine and go, okay, let's read the code and see, okay, what is going on? Is it correct? There actually was at least one time where it was incorrect. That the engine did not follow what the rules stated it was. And I had to correct that. So, moving onward and forward to the point where I enter this wonderful world of Starfleet Warlord. Now, and we last heard from Bruce Grawl around 1992. So, 13 years later, in 2005, Bruce Grawl went, I'm tired of this. And to be honest, I understand why he's tired of this. It's not the running of the turns. It's not the running of the games. That's not the hard part. The hard part is dealing with the customers afterwards. If there's an issue, especially if there's an issue with if you enter in the turns wrong, that's a big issue. Or they come up and they go, this result doesn't look right, and I have to go research that. That might take me somewhere. It could, depending upon what it is, it could take me 10 minutes it could take me an hour. Depends on what they're asking. Because in some cases, I actually have to look at the code, I have to look at the engine code and go, okay, how does this work? Obviously, look at the rule book. If the rules are specified, I have to look at the status of this person's corporation, what their ships are, things like this. This takes a lot of time, and this I can understand why Bruce Grawl he was done. It's like, hand wave. I'm done. No more Warlord. So in 2005, I was approached by Steve Cole because Steve Cole got was told by Bruce Grawl, I'm done. I'm just going to shut everything down. There'll be no more revenue from it. I'm done. So Steve Cole approached me, and Bruce Grawl and me discussed the deal, and it took a few months to work through all of the details. But finally we hammered it out. I got the source code for the engine, got sample turns, got an old copy of the aid, and just to let you know, I have no source code for the original DOS-based aid, which is written in Clipper. And the reason why is because it is one of those casualties of the Great Hard Drive crash of Bruce Grawl. Now, I forget when that occurred, but obviously it happened before 2005. And that's when Bruce Grawl lost a lot of IP, meaning he lost a lot of work he had done on the Omega empires, including in that, of course, he also lost the aid. Obviously, I'm not sure how he was able to recover some of the other things when it comes to Starfleet Warlord, whether it was that only the hard drive got corrupted, so he was able to recover some things, or he had certain ones that he had backups for. I'm not sure that whole history there. You want to ask Bruce Grawl? Ask Bruce Grawl because he knows a lot more about it. So at that point in time, Bruce Grawl had grown his business. He actually was doing two things at that moment in time. He was still doing the miniatures for ADB. That was part of his business, was creating the miniatures, and that was his major business. And of course, he ran Starfleet Warlord, but at that point he was done. He was done dealing with it. I'm assuming basically he looked at how much time it was taking him versus his other business and said, I'm done. So he decided that he was going to stop doing it, and I took over. Now, at that moment in time, he would get there was, my understanding, there was two ways he would actually get orders. Actually, three. Actually, no, two. This was play by mail. So physical snail mail envelopes. He would run the turns, print them out, send them off to the players. Or you could send him a diskette. The diskette would contain the electronic turn from the aid. He then would plug into his computer. Then he would download that the aid, the aid file. He'd then run it. He'd save the results and then put it back on the hard drive, and then send it off for the player. So, I think he'd still print out the results, but also then he'd give you the aid files back on the disk that he would send back to you. Now, to be honest, the crazy to me, I'm assuming he ran into issues with, every once in a while, a diskette becoming corrupted, or, in which case either the turns had to be resent either from the player or he had to resend them. So to say the very least, they were probably communicating a lot more on the phone. And that was also part of the list, which is you have addresses of people, and then you ask them if they want to share their address or phone number with other people in the community, and that's so that people could give them could talk to them on the phone, or send them a mail, and they could actually work out deals and things like that. But okay, so I took over. Now, of course, the first thing I said, this mailing things out in mail is nuts. This is 2005. We've got the internet, We can send email almost instantaneously. Not quite instantaneously, but close enough. So at that point, I changed it. I said, okay, that's it. Okay. The first decision I made on this, this is going to be played by email. But I'm still going to allow people to, do faxes. Actually, at that point, I still allowed them to physically send me orders. I still remember having the physical fax machine back then. Set up a second line in my house. Set up a fax machine and started then. Until the day that my fax machine... I'm not sure whether it was the fax line or the fax machine died. I forget which one. I think my fax machine died because my fax machine was having issues. So at that point, it was kind of an emergent decision, but I think it was probably the best decision out there, which is I, at that point, switched to an internet service. That would then you send the faxes to that internet service. You call it and fax them, and then I get an email with the orders in a PDF file, sent directly to me. So it's like, cool. That went well, and for a while, and I switched to I looked at the prices, and Lord knows, I'm glad I switched off these guys, because these guys, I forget who was it. It wasn't eFax. It was someone before them. Because I think TrustFax or something like that. The problem with them was canceling. When I tried to cancel them, they kept on charging me after it. I think I had to actually cancel my card to have them stop charging my account. It was either that, or it just took me a couple times to actually get through to them. It's like, okay, stop charging me. And that's when I moved to eFax, because eFax, I think it was definitely better. Definitely it was better service. And at that moment in time, the reason why I wanted to switch was because of their fax bank of fax machines was getting really quirky. It was not being very reliable. Of course, I still have some problems with eFax today, and it happens every once in a while. But so at the moment, I currently don't accept mail. Though in theory, I still will accept it, but I'm gonna jack up the price for you. I think currently I charge, actually currently I don't have anyone doing mail. So at the moment, previously I was to be like $9 a turn, because I actually physically send them mail, so it costs me money. So I'm not sure if someone actually wanted it. I probably charge them more. I might go up to like $10 to $12 a turn, because of, I'm sorry, it's nuts. It's completely and utterly nuts. So now, back in 2005, we still had the DOS-based aid. I set up a new website. At that moment, I went, okay, my thought processes was that, okay, I'm going to create this play by email service. Starfleet Warlord was going to be my first game on this play by email service, so I got play by email. Now, the original domain that I wanted was play by email, the one word, with no dashes. That wasn't available. So I got play-by-e-mail.com. So for those of you who've ever run in, when it comes to Starfleet Warlord, have run into me and went, this is why does he have all these dashes? Well, that's why I have all those dashes. A while back, I'm going to say somewhere between 3 and 5. No, it's like 5 years ago. I think it's like 5 years ago. I actually bought play-by-email, one word, .com because it became available. So I bought that. I'm gonna at the moment I'm gonna keep it. So at the very least, I don't have to worry about someone trying. If I ever grow it to a point where people actually want to squat a look-alike web domains, I won't have to worry about that one. I did find StarfleetWarlord.com, and that one should, in theory, I have not checked it lately, it should redirect to playbyemail.com. So the idea is someone ever typed in StarfleetWarlord.com, they'd find it. Now, I think I have not checked Google results lately when it comes to that. So it might be. If you say Starfleet Warlord, you might find playbyemail.com. My guess is you probably would, because it's been there for a long time. Now, getting back to, so I had grand plans. Big surprise. That always happens with me. I have grand plans, so I follow through with them. Not always. But one of my grand plans when I got Starfleet Warlord was to redo the engine in Java, and I looked at it and went, "Yeah, I'm not quite sure." And then I looked up a service to do the conversion for me, and I looked at the cost, and I went, "No," because see, the biggest problem with Clipper is DBase. DBase, unlike a normal programming language, each variable is considered local and so forth. When it comes to DBase, a variable can either be a local variable or it can actually reference a column in a record that you have currently loaded, and you don't know when it is one or the other. So that proves to be problematic. So converting it is difficult, and if I ever do it, actually, I talked to Dirk about doing that, and what he recommended was, he said, why don't you start small, and build it up, rewrite it from scratch, and build, start with small, boil it down to to the basics, which might be a good idea. I might do that one of these days. Currently, still most of my focus when it comes to work is mainly Starfleet SFU Online at the moment. I have done quite a bit of work on splitting out the Clipper components and have it so they can actually be run as automated systems. Now, there's some certain issues with those automated systems. That is, if there's an error, it will hang. Because it's going to prompt for an actual physical prompt, and that's a problem. Because of automated system, if it's purely automated, you'll never know when it's hung. So I will have to wait and see about that. What I might have to do is actually take the plunge and move to that automated system that I have, but run it manually, or at least have the automated system run while I'm watching it. And after I feel confident, after 5 or 10 games, whenever I decide that system is running smoothly without errors, then I'll probably at that point try to make an automated system completely when it comes to not looking at it and just deploying it. But anyhow, hopefully we'll see how that all goes. Now, in 2000, after I acquired Starfleet Warlord in 2005, of course, the first thing I needed to do, in my mind, was, okay, we have this aid, this text-based, because it's completely text-based. Have you ever seen it? It's completely text-based. It was a DOS program. So there's two ways of running that program. One, you have to install DOSBox, which is a DOS emulator, on your system. Some people have actually done that. The other one would be actually, in some cases, you actually can run the aid program in a command prompt on Windows. I've actually done that. It actually runs. So it works just fine. I'm not sure if it'll work on the latest. I think it requires a 32-bit operating system. I don't think it'll run on 64-bit. But anyway, moving onward. In 2006, I created the Java-based. I worked on creating basically a GUI. What I call is the GUI-based aid, because it was written in Java. So there's certain things that I could do. I could have it so it basically had all the functionality, or at least at that moment in time, it was some of the functionality of the aid. It had the basics that were required. You could actually enter in orders. It could validate the orders. Now, not always properly, but it would do that. It would make sure that when you plotted your movement, it would tell you if that movement was wrong. You could have the hotkeys to do the special commands, at least most of them, not all of them. I still have a few that are not quite right. When it comes to entering orders. So I made that available for people to use, so that you aren't limited by running on Windows or running on DOS. In theory, you can run Linux, though. To be honest, I don't think there's a single person running Linux or a single person running Mac that plays Starfleet Warlord. Now, I'm hoping with the advent of Dirk that will be open more. Now, it's taking him a long time, and as is, I'm thinking about doing something when it comes to the aid, is possibly do something just kind of rudimentary. Because Dirk has this wonderful, beautiful website that he's creating basically an aid to do. And that's one thing that, who was it? Darn, I forget his name at the moment. I think it might have been James Jeremiah that mentioned to me that, basically he was on vacation, he was away from his computer, and he'd like to do it on his phone. And what I'm thinking about doing is see if I can create a basic aid, really basic. It allows you to, you already can read the orders in your email. You can read your turn in your email. All you have to do is be able to take the turn, import it into the website, and then after you import it into the website, then use the aid right there. Original idea of that was just to have it so you didn't even require a login and so forth. I might require a login because one thing I've been doing lately is I've been revamping the Starfleet Warlord website because I figured that there's a lot of stuff I don't need. A lot of stuff can be automated. There's a lot of originally I actually did do some initial planning and implementation of doing an aid on the website itself, but I never got through it. I'm not the greatest JavaScript writer in the world, so I can't do websites that well. But so I have actually worked on a new website. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys real quick what that looks like. Because this is it's called right now. It's called new.playbyemail.com. This is not open for business, but it's a test site at the moment, so that people can, so that my players, my current customers can see what's going to look like. Because we have this, you can see the news, the current games. You can download the different things from the aid, version 1, I call it 1.0. Then we still have the aid, the DOS space back here. It's a little zip file. We have, of course, the Starfleet Warlord rules themselves, which are a PDF, a player reference. Actually, I gotta look at that. That looks like that might not work, and so forth. You can contact me back here. Got a list of prices. Electronic turns are $4. Manual turns are $7. You can pay either PayPal, Square, or you can mail in. You can mail me a check or money order. I did not put that up. That's one thing looks like I have to do. I have to add my address, so you can send it. I got nice games archive. Now, I would like to have this a little fancier, but I'm not sure how I could do that. But at the moment, you can, at the very least, you can look at the old games. You can look. This was called the final map. So each one of the players is here. Including NPCs like the Andromedan invaders. So you can see where is. Actually, I like this just because it's kind of boiled down. It makes it easy to see, which is okay. Each letter represents a different player, and this represents where your ships are in this different sector. So it gives you an idea of how many sectors the person has taken over and how large their territory really is. So that's one of those cool things about the final map. I got all the way up to, of course, Die Hard 49. So you can see even for Die Hard 49 what it looks like. Looks like, Peter Hickman. If you look, Peter Hickman. Here's Peter Hickman all the way over here, and a little bit up here. And it looks like he was starting to get some inroads here, a little bit of inroads here. G, what's G? G is, that was Bruce Brand. Was G. So here's Bruce Brand. It's like, you can see how big that was. I got some sample game files here. Oops. Obviously, I have to fix the links. I apologize that these links aren't working. Those links will have to work. And then, of course, there's my account. Actually, do I have this logged in? Okay, no. Okay. If you notice up here, it says off 0. That was the one major thing I wanted to do, which is I want to move off my managing things myself when it comes to that and use a third-party managing service, and then in this case off 0. And with that and JavaScript, I actually have a website so that you can log in. It can do everything that you need to do. There's only a few things that you really need to be able to do on the website. One, look at your account. You have to go into these guys. I have to work on exactly what to do. But if you want to reset your password, you have to go to these guys. I need to work on those finer details before I release it. But you can log in here. You can even reset your password. Say don't remember your password. They'll send a reset link to your email address. And then you can actually see your information. You can submit initial builds, and also you can pay for turns. And the thing is, pay for turns, a lot of the stuff is back end work, and that stuff should still work. I have to double check on that, but it should still work. And then, of course, the initial builds, the initial build still works just like the previous initial builds for the current website works. which is, you you're entering your initial builds. It will send you an email and send me an email of what your initial builds are. Now, obviously, I can update this a little bit to add certain things that, like currently, one thing I might want to add on to it is a sector special. Say, okay, instead of having, currently the process is that you do, when it comes to sector specials for Die Hard or other games where you can actually specify a sector special, that you can, what you would do is you send your initial email and then you would tell me in an email what your sector special is going to be. So, but with the new website, I'm thinking about doing is actually adding maybe an additional entry so you actually can enter in the sector special. I want to see if I can shrink the text a little bit. I think it's a little large. I haven't heard any complaints so far. Of course, I'm not sure how many people actually have hit the new website. So I'll have to, that I do not track. I don't track to see how many people hit the website. I did do a little tweaking on this website, which was I realized that there was a lot of things that people hit. Weird. The internet, let's call it, there's a person, a podcast I listen to called Security Now, and Steve Gibson came up with this term. It's called internet radiation. And that is all these bots that are going around searching for new websites and start just pounding them with different HTTP requests. And I was looking at the logs for my web server and going, what? Because I'm looking, because everything, almost everything should be going through the name, new.playbyema.com. And it was obvious to me that in some cases they weren't. They were just hitting the IP address. Directly to the IP address. So because for that one IP address, there is no name associated with it. They just start hitting IP addresses. So I went, fine. Turned off that. And so everything has to go through the load balancer. So in my mind now, I have a certain level of protection when it comes to the load balancer. Because in theory, if DigitalOcean wants to, I'm not sure if they have it available, but if they wanted to, they actually could add certain features into the load balancers to filter, certain requests and so forth. They could do that. They could actually modify the HTTP headers so that if there were some known malicious ones, they could then get rid of them. So that will be interesting when we get to that point. But that's what kind of what the future is going to look like when it comes to the new website. Obviously, we have Dirk, who's been working for it for like now 2 years, I think. Been working on the beautiful website. Obviously, the problem with Dirk at the moment is he can't use certain IP. There's certain IP he can use, certain IP he can't use. He can use like text strings. But things like, images of the ships, he can't use. He can't use SFU because he doesn't have a license to license them. I don't, as I mentioned before, I don't really have a license to license them per se. I have a license to use them because I'm considered a contractor working for ADB. That's basic terms. That's not what Steve Cole said, but when he explained it to me, that's what it boils down to. So it's like, okay, that's fine. As long as I'm covered. And I'm covered at, if Steve Cole kicks the bucket, God forbid that anything happens to Steve Cole. Oh, just a reminder, for those of you who not going to listen to the news portion, Steve Petrick, who's he runs the tournament, the Sapphire Star tournament. He is the rules guru for SFB. He's the one who answered all the rules questions on the discussion board and things like that. He had a stroke back on December 31st. He was in the hospital for a while. He's out of the hospital now. He's still recovering. He's able, he is able to enunciate and pronounce things fine. So he's good. He's still on medication now that will take care of issues he's having. So it won't happen again. And he's going right now. He's still going through physical therapy. So he's kind of out. He's not available at the moment. But just if you could, keep him in your thoughts and your prayers. That would be fantastic. Obviously, A to B is having their medical issues because they're showing their ages. From Gene with cancer, Steve Cole, I forget what he had a while back. Then there was the issue with Leanna. Now Steve Petrick. Waiting for Wolfie to have something be wrong with Wolfie. Jeez. Oh, it's just crazy. But anyhow, so that's what Starfleet. That's the history of Starfleet Warlord, as small, as short of a history as it stands. Obviously, if you have any questions about it, feel free to email me at Starfleet SFU on call at gmail.com. I'm always happy to answer questions. Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to comment. And I'm sure I'll probably post a link to this, probably with Starfleet Warlord, the group there. And of course, if they have questions, I'm sure they will ask. Though I'm sure most of them already know most of the history because a lot of the people there are already veterans. So, with that, I am Paul Franz, and I bid you a good night.